Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I'm doing a Shabby Chic Spring Book. For my project, I'm going to be using this hardcover book that I thrifted. I'm going to open it up to the center and then I'm going to create a glue and water mixture. I'm pouring out some of my Sealy's Quickset wood glue into a plastic container. I'm then adding some water. So probably I would say 2 parts glue to 1 part water. And then I'm going to go around and add that mixture to my entire book. I am going to make sure that I'm getting it on all the edges of the pages, on the top and on the bottom. And then once I've done that, I'm actually going to take the glue again and apply it directly to those very same areas. Now, this is not my first altered book that I've done. I've done 2 Christmas ones of these. Some of you have probably even tried this craft, and I could not resist making one for spring, and I'm definitely going to be doing one for Easter as well. These are so fun to make. So you can see I'm applying that glue to the edges of the pages as well. This is going to give them a sort of crinkled, worn look. I'm also applying my glue and water mixture to the book pages itself that are facing up at me, and I'm going to repeat this process a few times. I'm then going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to stagger my book pages and glue them together in sections. Now this is going to create a sort of opened book look here, like it's been opened to these pages and sort of sat there over time. And I'm not going to glue each and every single one of those pages together. You don't have to, because we've added that watered down glue mixture. It really will all hold together nicely. I'm then going to add some more of my water and glue mixture to the corner, and I'm going to use a paintbrush to curl my pages over. Now, how far you go with this and how many you curl is up to you. I just want a hint of age. After curling my pages, I also added a little bit of hot glue behind each one to further secure them in place. Next, I'm going to use my size 10 Eco brush and apply 2 coats of Dixie Belle's Buttercream Chalk Mineral Paint to cover the entire book, including the front covers. For this project, I'm going to be using the La Blanche Spring Birds mold and Redesign's Aviary mold. If you're in Australia, you can grab both of these molds off my website. After dusting the mold with cornstarch, I'm going to start working some clay into the Spring Birds mold. I first of all want to cast this lovely bird that sits amongst the florals. So I'm just working in sections, pulling back any excess clay. Then I'm going to flex the mold and then flip it over, and I'm going to let gravity help me get the design out. Now, it doesn't matter if I have little bits breaking off because I can always glue them back into place. I'm then going to flip it over and apply a generous amount of glue to the back, spreading it out with my fingers. And then I'm going to position this casting in the top left-hand corner. I'm then going to cast some more of the florals from the Spring Bird mold. Again, flipping it over. Gravity definitely is a big help here. And then I'm gluing that in place near our first casting. I'm then going to cast this little leaf. This is an individual leaf. This is quite a buildable design, so you can see I'm just piecing it together. I'm then going to use Redesign's Aviary mold, and I'm working the clay into the larger design here that has the branches and the florals. And then again, flipping it over and gently curling that mold back to release my casting. After adding glue to the back of this casting, I'm going to position it in the bottom right-hand corner of my design. Now, I did think about adding this little nest here. I will link it below. I just had it there as a bit of a guide, but in the end, I do end up making my own because the scale was a little bit off. I'm here just casting a branch from the aviary mold, and I'm setting that to one side. I'm then going back to the Spring Birds design there and casting some more florals. You see that I do switch back and forth between the 2 molds. I really like to have different scales of castings to choose from. It definitely helps to build a more realistic looking scene. Next, I'm going to cast each of the birds in the Redesign mold to work out which ones are going to work and to make sure that the book's not going to feel a bit too crowded. On this particular day, I was dealing with very hot weather, so I did have a few sections that broke off my castings, but that's okay. You can see I'm just gluing down my little bird, and then I'll glue down the tail separately. I'm then going to cast some more florals from the aviary mold, and I'm going to position that in the top right hand corner. You can see I just have the nest there as a bit of a guide while I'm working out placement. I'm then gluing the little swooping bird underneath that greenery. I'm then going to cast a single flower here and there to add. I added the branch that I cast from earlier, and then I also cast some more of the florals and added that to the branch. So you can see I'm mixing and matching the different sections from my two molds, and I'm adding individual leaves here and there as well to fill in the scene. I'm also going to cast quite a few of the design from the aviary mold that has the leaves. Again, this is helping to fill in the scene and add interest and balance, and I love when molds have these smaller elements that you can cast to really build your scene and customize. Now I need to make my nest, so I've rolled up a bit of clay. I've used the end of a paintbrush to make a little hole in the center, and then I just used my fingers to shape it, and now I'm using a palette knife to put some little grooves and lines in the clay to make it look more like a realistic nest. After gluing it in place, I then used some clay rolled up to make some little eggs to go inside. After I finished gluing my castings down, I let them dry overnight. The next day I came in with a base coat of Paint Couture's Farmhouse linen, and I went over the top of the entire design. I decided on this color because it was nice and bright and a really great base for adding the colors that I'm going to be working with today. I then let it dry. Next, I want to add a background of some sky, so I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Queen's Court paint. I started off adding it and then decided to add a bit of the Farmhouse linen to that Queen's Court to create a few different tones to work with here. So this is a bit of a lighter blue. So we're trying to create a sky in the background here, so I'm going to be working with a few different tones, and I also did bring in my mister as well to help thin out that paint and almost give it a bit of a watercolor look, because this is just the background. We're going to be building on top of that. I did want it to be quite a soft look here. So I'm going to be repeating the same process, adding the different tones of blue, using my mister to water it down, and then I did also grab a wet wipe as well to give it more of sort of a mottled look, to pull back some of that paint, almost like there's some clouds in the sky. Next, I decided I wanted a similar look down the bottom, so I'm using Paint Couture's Basil chalk paint and also the Farmhouse linen chalk paint to have a few different tones of green. I toyed with the idea of actually painting in some leaf shapes. You can see I'm sort of having a play with that here, but in the end I decided to go for a more subtle look like the sky, and we're going to be working with those different green tones but also mixing them and having them look a bit mottled like the sky, so it's a bit less intense, and so that the molds can really be the star of the show and not the background. So I'm going to continue adding that greenery down in the bottom section of the book. If you're going to give this a try and you don't want to be playing around with paints in the background, another option could be for you to use some sort of a decoupage design underneath your molds to start off with, instead of going to this trouble. I wanted this more of a subtle look here. I wanted to build my own background as opposed to finding something that would suit this perfectly, but that is definitely an option if you don't want to go to the bother of creating your own background. When that was dry, I took Paint Couture's Pine Cone and Pitch Black chalk paints, and I'm taking a little bit of the pine cone out and also some of that black paint and mixing them together to create a darker brown. We're going to be using this to go over the top of our little bird. I wanted these to have a more natural look, nothing too bright and over the top. I wanted this to be a pretty simple scene with the birds where the florals are the more colourful aspect of the design. So I'm just laying down that darker brown first, and I'm also adding a little bit to the head of the bird as well, and I'm just going to continue to paint each of them. The birds on this side of the book are going to be painted very similarly. The one on the left I'm going to add a bit more colour. I added a bit of white paint to my palette there and just used the same brush that I'd been using with the brown, so I've got a bit of a lighter brown there that I'm now coming in with on the rest of the bird. I also added some of that lighter colour over the top of the darker brown sections, and I like how this is catching the detail there. And then I'm using some of the pitch black chalk paint to go over the beak and the eyes of the bird. I then went in with some of the white farmhouse linen and did a few little speckles here and there. Next, I'm going to start adding some of the Basil chalk paint to the leaves on the branches under the bird, and I also grabbed some of that farmhouse linen to create some different tones of green. Then I'm using that same dark brown paint that we created on the branches. And I also layered in some of that lighter paint as well. Next, on the flowers, I'm going to use Berry Rouge by Paint Couture and Ballet Slipper from their Luxe Metallic line. I'm starting with the Berry Rouge, that's the darker metallic, and I'm adding that here and there on the flowers. That's going to be our darker tone. And then once I'm finished adding that to certain sections of the flowers before it's completely dry, I'm going to come in with Ballet Slipper and start layering that on top of it as well. And I just love how when this happens, the colors sort of mix together and create a more natural looking paint finish. So I'm going to continue to do that to the little flowers down the bottom. While that's still wet, I'm going to use Oyster Pearl by Paint Couture, and I'm going to put some of that Luxe Metallic in the center of each of the flowers. When that was dry, I took some of the Basil chalk paint and added it to the center of the flowers. I then used some more of that darker brown paint and I added it to the nest that we created. I tried to not get that paint on the little eggs, but I was able to wipe off certain sections where I'd made a few errors. I also added in some of that pine cone chalk paint over the top for some tonal difference. I then repeated the same process for our bird that was swooping down, the same as I had done on the bird below. I then moved on to the greenery and florals up the top and repeated the same process as we did below. If I've inspired you to try any of these Paint Couture products, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Once my paint was completely dry, I took a paintbrush and added a little bit of the farmhouse linen, then wiped it off, and then I went in and did some dry brushing over the top of our casting. So this is going to soften a lot of the colors and just give it more of a sort of faded vintage look. I'm going to repeat the same process up the top. I obviously have not painted the left-hand side just yet, but I was definitely playing around and experimenting with colors on the right-hand side first. Moving on to the left-hand side, and you'll be able to see that I definitely repeated a lot of the same processes as I did on the right-hand side. Got a little bit of the red in the section where I shouldn't have, so I just wiped some of that off. So I'm really just sort of repeating the same patterns there to make it look like they're sitting in sort of the same tree, but obviously the florals are at different stages of growth. So I'm going to continue to add those lovely lighter pinks, and then I'm coming in with the Basil chalk paint over the top of the greenery. After the greenery had dried, I then came in with some more of that darker brown mix that we'd made earlier, and I'm adding it to the branches. You can see I also swap to the pine cone chalk paint that we used as our base as well, because obviously branches don't have all the exact same tone. So definitely try to think about how these things would appear in real life. On the bird on the left, I'm using some more of the Queen's Court mineral paint, and I'm going to paint over the entire bird, excluding the feet and the beak, of course. And then once I had done that, I did then decide to come in with a little bit of white, just layering in a little bit of a lighter tone there. And then I also grabbed Paint Couture's Goldmine Luxe Metallic, and I just brushed a few little sort of flecks here and there into the bird's feathers there, just as a pop of lovely colour, a little bit of brightness, a little bit of something different. Next, I'm using pitch black chalk paint on the bird's feet and also on the beak and obviously the eye. When my paint is dry, I'm going to come in and do some more of that white dry brushing, just like we did on the right-hand side. I love how this simple technique not only softens the look, but it also brings out the details in these beautiful castings. Once my paint has dried, I'm going to take this script stamp, I'm adding some IOD black ink, and I'm going to randomly press it in random areas on my book so that it looks like writing that has faded from the background. And once I've done that, I'm taking a wet wipe and I'm going to wipe back some of the intensity of that ink. I am next then going to take a stamp from IOD's Antiquities stamp, and I'm going to press that just in the top left hand corner, and again I'm just going to wipe back some of the intensity of that ink. I'm then going to take Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I'm going to dab and stipple that over the entire background of the book. Now that doesn't mean I'm going to highlight every area with Crackle, but I want the option. Now I'm going to then let this dry for about an hour. When it's ready for the next step, it will feel sticky and tacky to the touch, so I can come in with step 2, and I'm repeating the same process, dabbing and stippling that all over. After I had finished applying this step 2, I let the crackle dry overnight. The next day, I came in with Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar Glaze, and I'm going to be applying it in certain sections. I'm really bringing out that lovely crackle that we added, but I'm also working it into the details of the castings. I'm even going over the top of those, but you can see I'm coming in pretty quick with a wet wipe to wipe back any excess that I don't want or any areas where I feel like it's built up a bit too much. My vision for this book as I was making it was that perhaps it was some sort of a nature book with birds and flowers in it, and maybe that's what the script is in the background, but it's sort of come alive for the reader. I know that might sound a little bit funny, but I like to have these sort of visions in my mind as I'm making things to help me to create them. Let me know in the comments if you do something similar, if you sort of create a backstory or something like that for whatever you're creating. Remember, if you don't have access to this particular glaze, you could create a paint wash out of a brown paint, or you could use an antiquing wax. Just remember to put down a clear coat of wax or a clear coat before you do this. After applying it to the front of the book, I also added it to the edges as well. Next, I'm going to use some of Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic. I've got a little bit on a small artist brush, and I'm just going to add it to the center of my flowers. Now, I've already got that green there. I'm not completely obscuring it. I just want to highlight that and have a pop of that beautiful bronze tone. When that's dry, I'm going to take Paint Couture's Oyster Pearl. I'm getting a little bit on my finger, and I'm just going to go over the top of the leaf details. Just a little bit of shine added to those areas. Next, I'm going to take a little makeup sponge and I'm going to put some of that Bronze Luxe Metallic on it, and I'm going to run that bronze over the top of the page edges. When that was dry, to finish it off, I took some chiffon ribbon and I'm going to attach it to the center as a page holder. So I'm just working out where I'm going to position it, and then I'm going to add some hot glue to the top there and sort of just poke that ribbon through. And then I'm going to cut off the excess down the bottom and sort of pull and fray at the edges. I then took the wet wipe that I was using for the glaze and I'm just running that over the top of the ribbon, and you can see how that is sort of staining and giving the chiffon ribbon more of an antiqued look. And here's our finished spring book. I had a lot of fun making this project and being able to use the beautiful molds by Redesign and La Blanche. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.